was a circumstance around that call that really caught her attention because normally those calls come from the hospital itself, but in this case, the call had come from people associated with the hotel, the Oberoi residents, for a hotel to be playing this kind of role in transporting a body. That was clearly unusual. So she rejected the body. She said, I'm not taking any body from a hotel. It should come from the hospital.
So the body is taken to a second embalmer who does embalm Jerry, and then his body is sent back to Canada. And there is a service held for Jerry in Nova Scotia where his body was buried.
There were elements of the narrative that were clearly odd, but I wasn't able to find anything that pointed in the direction of this being a falsified death.
I haven't seen anything to really convince me that he is dead. The fact that the funeral was a closed casket says to me that who saw the body? Whose body was buried? Was it really Gerald Cotton's?
Hey, Shorts. Hey, Sam Squash, how you doing? Hope you guys are doing good today. Just gotta find my book to put on real quick.
The founder of the crypto exchange, Rodrigo CX, died while on a trip to India. Now investors who lost money in the collapsed exchange are demanding extraordinary action be taken.
This is all the makings of a very bizarre Hollywood drama. They want the body exhumed to prove that it is in fact him.
In December 2019, the law firm representing all creditors
Hey, unknown dude, how you doing?
RCMP
You have a good one too, bro.
the mounted police exhumed the body and to conduct an autopsy.
Right.
People
And Rosanna
that
would
if he's
Baize
alive,
him?
if
She
he
said
is
incredulously.
somewhere
Egwene gave a vigorous nod in that ridiculous Aiel scarf. Last night they had an argument. She's still trying to convince him not to cross the dragon wall, and finally he told her to stand outside until she cooled down. She looked about to swallow her tongue, but she did it. She stayed out in the night for an hour anyway. It is not proper, Elaine said, resettling her shawl firmly.
I feel like there's something else coming. I feel like there's still some unanswered questions. The FBI is involved, the Royal Canadian Mounted
How's everyone's day going so far?
agencies. But whatever they're doing behind the scenes to look into this, we're not really going to be privy to.
Everyone's looking at death here as if it's the be all end all.
Let's go with myths and legends from around the
The
world.
body is still missing, so the house is very much on fire. There just happens to be a dead body.
Stories from the Mont Diato and the Marignan. Chapter 19. Stories from the Mont Diato and the Marignan. Chapter 19, Book 5. The Adventures of Sir Geraint. Written by
Hey,
Beatrice.
Egypt, how you doing?
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain.
Set.
For more information or to volunteer,
Heartbeat.
please visit LibriVox.org. Book 5. Sir Geraint. Chapter 19.
That I
The
do
Adventures of
a
Geraint.
little live.
It befell one Whitsunday that Arthur was holding his court at Carignan,
Brazil.
when word was
Hell
brought
yeah.
to him of the splendid white stag that ranged the hills
Jose,
of Jean.
I think that's how you
And
pronounce
forthwith
it.
the king proclaimed a hunt for the morrow.
If not, I'm sorry I
So, with the
butchered it.
dawn, there was much trampling of hoofs and baying of hounds, as all the knights got to horse. But Queen Guinevere herself, though she had said she would ride with the hunt, slept late, and when she called her maidens to her, it was broad day. Then, with much haste, she arrayed herself, and taking one of her ladies with her,
Thought
rode
I'd
to the
do
little
a
rising ground in the
little
forest,
live while I'm
near which, as she well knew, the hunt must pass.
Okay, hell yeah, I definitely appreciate it, Jose.
Presently, as she waited, there came riding
Yeah,
by
James
the
got
mountain
definitely a good
Sir
dude.
Geraint of Devon. He was arrayed neither for the chase nor for the fight, but
Yeah,
wore a
we've been here a
surcoat
couple
of
of
white
times.
satin,
Let's
and
do
about
that.
him a loose scarf of purple with a golden apple at each
Yeah,
corner.
yeah,
The
so I was
queen
saying
then
I was
answered his
I'm house
salutation.
sitting for
She said,
my
"How
mom
is
and
it,
aunt right now.
Prince, that ye be not ridden with the hunters?"
Ain't no
"Madame,"
problem, bro.
answered he,
They're getting into
"shame
you
I say
too.
it, I slept
At least
too
for
late."
me, it's
Smiling, the queen said,
almost 1
"And we
o'clock
are
in the
both on the
afternoon.
same case, for I also arose too late. But tarry with me, and soon you will hear the baying of hounds, for often I have known them to break covert here." Then as they waited on the little woodland lawn,
Nice
there came
bloke.
riding past a knight full armed, a lady with him, and behind the wolf was shaken and trembling, and they passed without word in salutation to the queen. Then Guinevere said to Geraint, "Prince, may you not ignorant?" "Nay, madam," he said, "his arms I know not, and his
I
face
got
I
this
have
shirt
not seen."
from
Thereupon
Cave City
the queen turned to her
Cannabis.
attendant and said, "Ride after them quickly, and ask the dwarf for his
This one
master's
ain't
name."
come from them, but
So the maiden did as she
still
was
another
bidden,
bone piece
but
I
when she
have.
inquired of the dwarf, he answered her roughly, "I will not tell you my master's name."
Hey, Michigan native, how you
"Since thou art
doing?
so churlish," said
Thanks for
she,
stopping
"I
by.
will even ask him myself." "That thou shalt not," he cried, and struck her across the face with his whip. So the maiden, alarmed and angered, rode back to the queen.
Right now,
and told her all
well,
that
I'm
had
smoking
happened.
roaches, but
"Madam," cried Geraint, "the churl has wronged your maiden and insulted your person.
I'm
I
topping
pray
them
you,
with
suffer me to do your errand
a
myself."
little bit of wax.
With the word, he put spurs onto his horse, and rode after the three. And when he had come up to the dwarf, he asked the knight's name as the maiden had done, and the
So it
dwarf
makes
answered him as he had
the
answered
roaches a
queen's
little bit
name.
more bearable.
"I will speak with thy master himself,"
That's better.
said Geraint. "Thou shalt not, by my faith," said the dwarf. "Thou art not honourable enough to speak with my lord." "I have spoken with men of as good rank as he," answered Geraint, and would have turned his horse's head that he might ride after the knight, but the dwarf struck him across the face with such a blow that blood spurted forth over his purple scarf. Then, in his
defenseless and beaten, he could have spared the young innocent from his horrid fate. He could have killed Drizzt then and there, mercifully, and released him from the inevitable circumstances of life in Menzo Barenzian. Zack paused in the long corridor and turned back to watch the chamber.
Firmly. Men have no more business ordering Aes Sedai about than they do wise ones, even the Karakan. "They certainly do not," Nynaeve agreed, then had to clamp her mouth shut to keep from gaping at herself.
Be right back,
What
everyone.
do I care if he makes her dance to his tune? She has made all of us dance to hers often enough. But it was not proper. I do not want to be Aes Sedai just to learn more about healing. I want to stay who I am. Let him order her about. Still, it was not proper. "At least he talks with her now," Egwene said. "Before he turned to acid if she came within 10 feet of him. Nynaeve, his head swells bigger every day." "Back when I thought you'd follow me as wisdom," Nynaeve told her wryly, "I taught you how to take swelling down. Best for him if you do it, even if he has turned into the king bull in the pasture. Maybe most because he is. It seems to me that kings and queens can be fools when they forget what they are and act like who they are, but they're worse when they only remember what they are and forget who. Most could do with someone whose only job is to remind them that they eat and sweat and cry the same as any farmer." Mylene folded her shawl around her, seeming unsure whether to agree or not, but Egwene said, "I try, but sometimes he doesn't seem like himself at all, and even when he is, his arrogance is usually too thick a bubble to prick. Do the best you can. Helping him hold on to himself may be the best thing that anyone could do, for him and the rest of the world." That produced a silence. She and Egwene certainly did not like to talk about the eventuality of Rand going mad, and Mylene did
Yeah.
not like it any better.
No problem, bro.
"I have
Thanks for
something
stopping
else
by.
important to tell you," she went on after a moment. "I think the Forsaken are planning something. It was not the same as telling them about Brigitte. She made it seem that she herself had seen Lanfear and the others. In truth, Mogadin was the only one she could recognize at sight, and maybe Asmodean, though she had only seen him once. and at a distance. She hoped neither of them thought to ask how she knew who was who, or why she thought Mugodi might be skulking about. In actuality, the problem did not arise from that at all. "Have you been wandering the world of dreams?" Milane's eyes were green ice. Nynaeve met her level stare for level stare, despite Egwene's rueful head-shaking. "I could hardly see Ravine and the rest without it, now could I?" "Aes Sedai, you know little and you try too much. You should not have been taught the few pieces that you have. For myself, I sometimes regret that we agreed even to these things. Unschooled women should not be allowed in Tel Runriod. I have schooled myself in more than you ever taught me." Nynaeve kept her voice cool with an effort. "I learned to channel on my own, and I do not see why Tel Runriod should be any different." It was only stubborn anger that made her so. She had taught herself to channel, but without knowing what it was that she was doing, and only after a fashion. Before the White Tower, she had healed sometimes, but unaware, until Moiraine proved it to her. Her teachers in the tower had said that was why she needed to be angry in order to channel. She had hidden her ability from herself, afraid of it, and only fury could break through that long-buried fear. "So, you are one of those the Aes Sedai call wilders." There was a hint of something in the last word, but whether scorn or pity, Nynaeve did not like it. The term was seldom complimentary in the tower. Of course, there were no wilders among the Aiel. The wise ones who could channel found every last girl with the spark born in her, those who would develop the ability to channel sooner or later, even if they did not try to learn. They claimed also to find every girl without the spark who could learn if they kept it. No Aiel girl died trying to learn by herself. "You know the dangers of learning the power without guidance, Aes Sedai. Do not think the dangers of the dream are less. They are just as great, perhaps more for those who venture without knowledge." "I am careful," Nynaeve said in a tight voice. She had not come to be lectured by this sun-haired vixen of an Aiel. "I know what I am doing, Nynaeve." "You know nothing. You are as headstrong as this one was when she came to us." The wise one gave Egwene a smile that actually seemed affectionate. "We tamed her excessive exuberance, and now she learns swiftly, though she does have many faults still." Egwene's pleased grin faded. Nynaeve suspected that grin was why Melaine had added the last. "If you wish to wander the dream," the Aiel woman went on, "come to us. We will tame your zeal as well. "I thank you very much," Nynaeve said with a polite smile. "Ah, Nalain will die on the day he learns that you are dead." Ice stabbed in the heart. Ah, Nalain was what the Aiel called Lan. One man, it meant in the old tongue, or man alone, or the man who is an entire people. Exact translations from the old tongue were often difficult. The Aiel had a great deal of respect for him, the man who would not give up his heart to Shadow, the enemy that had destroyed his nation. "You are a dirty fighter," she muttered. Melaine quirked an eyebrow. "Do we fight? If we do, then know that in battle there is only winning and losing.
Hey, AP, how you doing, bro?
Are for games. I want to promise that you will do nothing in the dream
Hope you're
without
doing
first
good.
asking one of us.
I'll be right back. I got something to show you.
So I would hear you say it." Nynaeve gritted her teeth. The words would be easy to say. She did not have to hold to them. She was not bound by the 3 hours. But it would be admitting that Melaine was right. She did not believe it, and she would not say it. "She'll not promise, Melaine," Egwene said finally.
Hell yeah,
"When
appreciate
she
it, brother.
gets that muley look, she wouldn't come out
Some
of
of
the
the
house
dabs
with
I'm
her
doing
shoulder
right now.
on fire."
See if I don't drop
Nynaeve
none.
spared a piece of glare for her. Muley indeed, when all she did was refuse to be pushed about like a rag doll. After a long moment, Melaine sighed. "Very well. But it would be well to remember, Aes Sedai, that you are but a child in Tel Runriod." Come, Egwene, we must go. An amused wince crossed Egwene's face as the two faded away.
It's not
Abruptly,
too
Nynaeve
bad. That's
realized that her clothes had changed.
some Sunday driver.
Had been changed. The wise ones knew enough
That's what I'm
of
using.
Tel'aran'rhiod to alter things about
Well, I'm doing
others
dabs
as
of
well
it
as
too, but
themselves. She wore a
that's what I'm
white
using
blouse
to
and a dark skirt.
top my
But unlike those of
my
the women
rotary.
just gone, this stopped well short of her knees. Her shoes and stockings were gone, and her hair was divided into two braids. One
Hell
from
yeah,
each
bro.
ear, woven with yellow ribbons.
Yeah,
A
right
rag
now
on a carved and painted
I'm at
chair
my
sat beside her bare feet. She
my
could hear her
mom's and
teeth
aunt's house right
grinding.
now.
This had happened once
House
before,
sitting.
and she had pried out of Egwene that this was how the Aiel dressed little girls. In a fury, she switched back to the yellow Tarabonner silk. This time it adhered even more closely and kicked the doll. It sailed away,
Nice little
vanishing in
blown
midair.
piece.
That Mullane probably had her eye on Lan. The Aiel all seemed to think he was some sort of hero. The high neck became a tall lace collar, and the deep, narrow neckline
Hey,
showed her
enforcer.
cleavage. If
Yeah.
that woman so much as smiled at him, if he... Suddenly she became aware of her fast-sinking, rapidly widening neckline, and hastily brought it back up. Not all the way, but enough that she did not have to blush. The dress had grown so tight that she could not move. She took care of that, too. So she was supposed to ask permission, was
But
she?
the nectar collector
Go
I'm using
begging the
right
wise
now
ones before doing
is
anything?
one I got also
Had she
from
not defeated Mogadine?
Cave City
They had
Cannabis.
properly impressed at the time, but they seemed to have forgotten.
Like a beer
If
bottle
she could
brown.
not use Brigitta to find
Pretty
out
much
what
just a
was
straight
going on
shot,
in the tower,
titanium now.
perhaps there was a way she could do it herself. Chapter 15. What can be learned in dreams? Carefully,
Then
Nynaeve
my
formed an image in her mind of the
well, I
unfinished
like
study, just
It's
as she had envisioned the heart of the stone
let's see if I
on
can
going
get
to
it.
sleep. Nothing happened, and she frowned.
Nice
She
Game
should
of
have been
Thrones
taken to the White Tower, to the
tray.
room she had visualized.
Some White Walkers on
Trying
it.
again, she imagined a room there that she had visited much more often, if more unhappily. The heart of the stone became the study of the Mistress of Novices, a compact, dark-paneled room full of plain, sturdy furnishings that had been used by generations of women who had held that office. When a novice's transgressions were such that extra hours of scrubbing floors or raking paths would not atone, it was here that she was sent. For an accepted to receive that summons took a greater transgression, but still she went on leaden feet, knowing the outcome would be just as painful, perhaps more so. Nynaeve did not want to look at that. Shiriam had called her willfully stubborn on her numerous visits, but found herself staring at the wall, where others had accepted to look at their own weeping faces while listening to Shiriam lecture about obeying the rules, or showing proper respect, or whatever. Obeying others' rules and showing required respect had always tripped up Nynaeve. The faint remnants of gilt on the carved frame said it had been there since the War of the 100 Years. The Tarabonner dress was beautiful, but anyone
I'm
who
not
saw
sure.
her would be suspicious. Even Domani
They could be gone
circumspectly when they
for
visited
probably
the
about a
tower,
week or so.
and she could not imagine anybody dreaming
But
of herself in the tower except on her best behavior. Not that she
mine,
would
my
likely
brother's
meet anyone,
house is
except perhaps someone who had dreamed
not that
herself
far
into
away.
Tel'aran'rhiod for a few moments.
Maybe
Before
like a
Egwene,
couple minute
there had
drive
not
from
been a
here,
woman
so
in
it's
the
not
tower
too
who
far
could
from
enter the world
where
of
I'm at
dreams
now.
unaided, since Corianna
Hey,
killed
MJ420, how you
400
doing?
years ago. On the other hand, among the Ter'angreal stolen from the tower that were still in the hands of Liandrin and her
Hell yeah,
confederates,
MJ420.
11 had last been studied by Corianan. The two others of Corianan's study, the two that she and Elaine had in hand, both gave access.
My brother will probably show it to me when he
It was
gets
best
there.
to assume that the rest did too. There was small chance that Liandrin or any of the others would dream themselves back to the tower they had fled, but even that chance was too big to risk.
I don't know if my brother's watching this or not, but
For that matter, she could not really be sure that the stolen Ter'angreal were all that Corianan had investigated. The records were often murky about Ter'angreal no one understood, and others could very well be in the hands of Black Sisters, still in the tower. The dress changed completely, became white wool, Soft,
Yeah, I'm definitely
but
got
not of
to. I better got
particular
that notification
fine
at 8 p.m.
quality,
Definitely got to
and
watch
band
that.
at the hem with 7 colored stripes, one for each aja. If she saw anyone who did not vanish after a few moments, she would take herself back to Sienda, and they would think she was only one of the accepted, touching Tel Run Riyadh in her dreams. No, not the inn,
Hell yeah,
but
MJ.
Shiriam's study. Anyone like that would have to be Black Aja, and after all, she was supposed to be hunting them. Completing her disguise, she gripped her suddenly red gold braid and grimaced at Milane's face in the mirror. Now there was a woman she would like to hand over to Shiriam. The study of the Mistress of Novices was near the novices' quarters, and the wide tiled hallways flickered with occasional motion past elaborate wall hangings and unlit stand lamps. Flashes of frightened girls all in novice white. A good many novice nightmares would contain
Day 54.
Shiriam. Ignored them as she
Yeah,
hurried by.
the blue
They
gelato
wouldn't
definitely
even blow the
does sound
breeze long
tasty.
enough to see her, or if they did, they would simply think her part of their own dream. It was only a short climb up broad stairs to the Amerlin's study. As she approached, suddenly Elida was in front of her.
So hopefully when my brother
sweaty-faced
gets that
in a
package, he
blood-red
comes
gown,
by.
the stole of the Amerlin's seat around her shoulders, or almost the Amerlin's stole. It had no blue stripe. Those
Yeah, because my
stern
mom's
dark
house,
eyes focused
I don't
on
mind it
Nynaeve.
being here because it's watching
I
after
am
my
the
mom and
Amerlin's
dad's house
seat
and
girl.
whatnot.
Do you not know how to show respect?
But
I will have you.
yeah,
In mid-word,
the house
she
is
was
definitely
gone.
haunted.
Nynaeve
Definitely a lot of
exhaled
activity
rapidly.
here.
Elida as Amerlin.
My
That was a nightmare
Hell
for
yeah.
certain. Probably her fondest dream, she thought wryly. It will snow in Tyr before she ever rises that high. The anteroom was much as she
Yeah,
remembered.
yeah, it definitely
With
sucks,
one wide
MJ, when
table and
you have to
shared
fight the
dining
heat
space
outside to
with
keep
the
it cool.
commons. A few chairs sat against the wall for Aes Sedai waiting to speak with the Amerlin.
Right, the
Novices
cures,
and
definitely
accepted stood.
the part
Neat
you got to
array
get
of papers
down
on the
just right.
table, bound scrolls and large parchments with seals and letters seemed unlike Lyanna, though. Not that she was untidy, quite the reverse. Yet Nynaeve had always thought she would put
Yeah, but
everything away at
there's
once. She pushed open the door
definitely
to
a
the
lot
inner
more
room,
activity
but her step slowed as she entered. No wonder she
in the
had not been
house
able to
than I
bring
remember
herself
it being.
here. The room was
And it hasn't
nothing
been that
like
long
what
of a
she
period
remembered.
that I've
That
had
heavily
a house
carved
sit here.
table and tall throne-like chair. The vine-carved
Nighttime's
stools
definitely
arranged in a perfect curve in front of the table,
interesting to
not
say the
one
least.
so much as an inch out of place. Swan Sanche affected simple furnishings, as if pretending she was still only a fisherman's daughter, and she kept only one extra chair, which she did not always let visitors use. And that white vase full of red roses, rigidly arranged on a pedestal like a monument. Swan enjoyed flowers, but she preferred a bouquet of colors, like a field of wildflowers in miniature. Above the fireplace had hung a simple
On a road
drawing of
trip?
fishing boats in tall reeds.
Who? Me?
Now there were 2 paintings, one of which Nynaeve recognized. Rand, battling the Forsaken who had called himself Baalzamon, in the clouds above Falma. The other, on 3 wooden panels, portrayed scenes that linked to nothing she could pull out of her memory. The door opened, and Nynaeve's heart leaped into her throat. A red-haired accepted she had never seen before stepped into the room and stared at her. She did not wink out of existence. Just as Nynaeve was preparing to leap back to Shiriam's study, the red-haired woman said, "Nynaeve, if Mylene knew you were using her face, she'd do more than put you in a child's dress." And just that suddenly she was Egwene, in her Aiel garb. "You nearly frightened 10 years out of me," Nynaeve muttered. "So the wise ones have finally decided to let you come and go as you please? Or is it behind? You should be frightened," Egwene, color rising in her cheeks. "You are a fool, Nynaeve. A child playing in the barn with a candle." Nynaeve gaped. Egwene?
Not that I know of.
"You listen to
I
me,
know my
Egwene
mom and
Alexander.
Dad's had this trailer
I'll not
for
take that from
a
Mylene,
good
and I won't
minute.
take it. You had best
I'm not
take
sure
it
if
from
anything's
someone
happened on the
before you get
property,
yourself killed.
but
I ought to take that stone ring away from you. I should have given it to Elaine and told her not to let you use it at all." "Told her not? Do you think Mylene was exaggerating?" Egwene said sternly, shaking her finger almost exactly like Mylene. "She was not, Nynaeve. The wise ones have
but
told you the simple
ghosts and
truth about
spirits
Tel'aran'rhiod
are,
time and again. But you
how
seem
can I
to think
put
they're
it,
fools whistling in a high wind.
weird about me.
You are supposed to be a grown woman, not a silly
They have
child.
odd reactions
I
towards me.
vow, whatever sense you once had in your head seems to have vanished
Hell
like a
yeah.
puff of smoke. Well, find it, Nynaeve. She sniffed loudly, rearranging the shawl on her shoulders. Right now, you are trying to play with the pretty flames in the fireplace, too foolish to realize you might fall in. Nynaeve stared in amazement. They argued often enough, but Egwene had
That's the
never,
fan.
ever tried to dress her down like a girl caught with her fingers in the honey jar. Never. The dress. It was the acceptance dress she was wearing, and someone else's face. She changed herself back to herself, in a good blue wool that she had often worn for circle meetings and to put the council straight. She felt robed in all her old authority as wisdom. I am
How
well
long should
aware
you
of
hang
how
it
much
for?
I don't
I'm
know,
not sure
she
on
said
that.
levelly. But those Aiel, do you realize you could dream yourself into something you could not get out of? Dreams are real here. If you let yourself drift into a fond dream, it could trap you. You'd trap yourself until you died. Will you? There are nightmares walking Tel'aran'rhiod, Nynaeve. Will you let me speak? Nynaeve barked. Or rather, she tried to bark it. There was rather too much frustrated pleading in there to suit her. Any at all would have been too much. No, I will not, Egwene said firmly. Not until you want to say something worth listening to. I said nightmares, and I meant nightmares, Nynaeve. When someone has a nightmare,
Well,
while
right
they're
now
dead,
it's
it is real too. And sometimes
a
it
mix.
survives after the
I'm
dreamer is gone.
I'm smoking
just
on
don't
roach
realize,
weed right
do you?
now, but I have it topped with
Suddenly, rough hands enveloped Nynaeve's arms.
a little bit of
Her
Sunday
head
driver
whipped
and a
from
little bit
side
of
to
a
side,
strawberry
eyes
shortcake
bulging. Two huge, ragged men
live
lifted her
rosin.
into the air, faces half melted
Pretty much
bones of coarse flesh,
a
drooling
little bit of
mouths
this
full of
topped on
sharp
top of
yellow
it.
teeth. She tried to make them vanish. If a wise one dreamwalker could, so could she. And one of them ripped her dress open down the front like parchment. The other seized her chin in a horny, calloused hand and twisted her face toward him. His head bent toward her, mouth opening. Whether to kiss or bite, she did not know.
It's a salad
She would
bowl,
rather
but it
die
is
than allow either. She flailed for Saidar and found nothing. It was horror filling her,
try not to
not
dump
anger.
it out.
Thick fingernails
Pretty
dug
much.
into her cheeks, holding her head
Whoa.
steady. Egwene had done this somehow.
It's
Egwene.
pretty much roach weed.
Please, Egwene. It was a squeal, and she was too terrified to care. Please! The men, creatures, vanished, and her feet thudded to the floor. For a moment, all she could do was shudder and weep. Hastily, she repaired the damage to her dress, but the scratches
But even
from long
doing it this
fingernails
way
remained on
definitely
her neck and chest. Clothing could be mended easily in Tel'aran'rhiod, but whatever happened to a human? Her knees shook so badly that it was all she could do to
It's
stay
definitely
upright.
it's a good
She
relaxing
had
one just
expected
because
Egwene to comfort her, and
all them
for once
roaches
she
are already all
accepted it
coated in
gladly.
resin
But the other woman only said,
and then topped with
"There are
wax.
worse
So
things here, but nightmares are
definitely
bad enough. I made
help
these
you out if
and
you're
unmade them, but
having
even
some
I
aches
have
and
trouble
pains,
with those I just find. And I did not try to
which is
hold
like
them that
me
much.
pretty much every
If you
day.
knew how to unmake them, you could have." Nynaeve tossed her head angrily, refusing to scrub the tears from her cheeks.
But right now, my
I
doctor
could have
doesn't
dreamed myself away.
want to
Shiri,
get
I'm
to
stuck. We're back to my bed.
the pain management part of my
Of course she did not.
like
If you had
visits,
not been
I guess,
too
or
scared spitless to think of it, Egwene said dryly. Oh, take
how would I
that
put it?
sullen look off your face.
She hasn't
It
got that
looks
far in
silly
my
on you.
treatment, I guess you could say.
She glared at the other woman. but
She's
it
more
did not
concerned
rise
about
again as she did. Instead of flaring
my
into
blood pressure,
argument, Egwene merely
trying to get
arched
that
an
under
eyebrow
control.
at her. None
I'm
of
actually
this looks like Swan
probably
Sunday,
probably should
Nynaeve
have did
said
it
to
years
change the
ago.
subject. What had
But I
gotten
finally
into
got me
the
a
girl?
doctor,
It doesn't,
and she's giving me
Egwene
blood pressure
agreed,
medicine to help
looking
that
around
out.
the room. I see why I had
Because
to come
last
by way
visit,
of my
yeah,
old room in the novices' quarters.
last visit
But I suppose
I think I
people do
kind of
decide to try
scared her.
something new sometimes.
She's trying to get me to go to the ER
That is
because
what I mean.
my blood
Nynaeve
pressure was
told
a
her
little high.
patiently. She had not sounded sulky, and she had not looked sullen. It was ridiculous. The woman who furnished this room doesn't look at the world the same as the woman who chose what used to be here. Look at those paintings.
Well,
I don't know what the triple
I
thing
guess
is,
more than
but
Little
you can
High.
recognize the
I
other
say
as
it
well
was
as
a little
I.
high just
They
because
had both seen it happen. Bonwin, I
what
should
my blood
say.
pressure is and
Egwene
what it
said
was,
thoughtfully.
it
You
was
never
just a
did
little
listen
bit
to the
higher.
lectures as you should. It is a triptych. Whatever it is,
But my
it's the
blood
other that's
pressure at that
important.
time was,
She had listened to the
I think it was
yellows
like
well enough. The rest was a pack of
176
useless
over.
nonsense, often as not. It seems to me that the woman who hung it wants to be reminded how
What was
dangerous
it,
Rand
120?
is. If Swan Sanche has turned against Rand for some reason,
So I
Egwene
kind of
could be
scared her
far
on that.
worse than just her wandering
Hey,
lame
vegan
back in
dolls, how
town.
you doing?
Perhaps,
Thanks for stopping
Egwene
by.
said judiciously. Maybe the papers will tell us something. You search in here. When I finish with Lyanna's desk, I will help you. Nynaeve stared indignantly at Egwene's
Actually,
bag
no,
as she
not
left.
really.
You search in here,
Because for,
indeed.
like
Egwene
I
had
said,
no
like
right to
I
give
probably
her
should have got
orders.
taken care of years
She ought
ago
to march
because
right
I've been
after her and tell her so in no uncertain terms.
what I consider
Then why are
normal
you standing here
is
like
what
a
a
lump?
lot of people
She
consider
asked
high.
herself angrily.
Well, my blood pressure
Searching the
before
papers
they
was a
started
good
giving me a
idea,
medicine
and she
for it,
might as well do so in here as
when my
out
blood
there.
pressure was on a normal
In fact, the
basis,
Amalin's
it was
desk was more
usually
likely to hold something important.
about 170
Grumbling to herself about what she
over
would do to set Egwene
105
straight,
is
she
what my
stalked
blood
to the
pressure was
thickly
on a
carved table, kicking her skirts
daily
with every step.
basis for
There
months
was nothing on the
and
table
months.
except 3 ornately lacquered boxes, arrayed with painful precision. Remembering the sorts of traps that could be set by someone wanting to ensure privacy, she made a long
Which I guess
stick
it being
which
that
opened
high
the
for that
hinged
long a
lid of the
period of
first,
time isn't
a
good.
golden green thing decorated with wading herons. It was a writing case with pens and ink and sand. The largest box with red
This helps
roses
with it.
twining through golden scrolls held
Smoking
20 or
helps
more
it helps
delicate
lower my
carvings of ivory and
as long as I
turquoise,
stick with the
animals and people,
mainly
all laid
indicas,
out
it
on
helps with
pale
my
gray
blood
velvet.
pressure.
As she pushed up the lid of the third box, golden hawks fighting among white clouds in a blue sky, she noticed that the first 2 were closed again. Things
But they
like that
switched my
happened
medicine and
here.
they have me on a new one
Everything
now,
seemed to
so
want to
see
remain
how
as
that
it was in
goes.
the waking world. And on top of that, if you took your eyes away for a moment, details
The
could be
last
different
blood
when you
pressure
looked
medicine they
back.
had me on,
The third box did hold documents.
the
The
side
stick
effects from it
vanished,
were
and she gingerly lifted
getting
out
a little
the
too
top sheet of
ridiculous,
parchment.
a
Formally
little too,
signed Jolene Aes
I
Sedai,
guess
it was
severe,
a
you could
humble
say.
request to serve a set of penances that made Nynaeve wince just scanning them rapidly. Nothing there that mattered except to Jolene. A scrawl at the bottom said "Approved" in angular script. As she reached to put the parchment down, it
I'm
faded
hoping we
away.
get that
The box
taken
was
care of
closed too.
because
Sighing, she opened it again.
the
The
pain
papers
part
inside looked different.
that
Holding
I
the
go
lid, she
with,
lifted them out one by one and read quickly, or tried to read. Sometimes the letters and reports vanished while she was still picking them up. Sometimes when she
he
was no
swears
more
by
than
it,
halfway down the page. If they had a salutation, it was simply
because
"Mother" with
if I
respect.
get the pain
Some were signed
under
by Aes
control that I
Sedai,
have to deal
others
with,
by women with other titles,
then
nobles, or
it
no
won't affect my
honorific at
blood
all.
pressure so much. But she
None of
wants to
it
take
seemed
care
to
of the blood
bear on the
pressure
matter
before
at
she gets
hand.
to the pain.
The Marshal General of
Because my pain I
Saldaria
deal
and his
with,
army
it's
could not be found,
in my
and
lower
Queen
back, but it
Zenobia
hurts
was
from my
refusing
lower
to
back
cooperate.
all the way down
She
to
managed to finish that
all the way
report,
down my
but it
legs,
assumed that the reader knew why the man
and
was
that
not in
shit,
Saldaria,
that pain is
and
gnarly, and
what
I
the
don't know
Queen
why
was supposed to be
it hurts
cooperating
that
about.
bad.
No report had come from any Ajah's eyes and ears in Tanchico for 3 weeks, but she got no further than that one fact. Some trouble between Ilian on one side and Morandi on the other was abating, and Pedro Nile was claiming credit. Even in the few lines she got, she could see the writer's teeth gnashing. The letters were all no doubt very important, those she was able to hurry through, and those that faded away under her eyes, but of no use to her at all. She had just begun what seemed to be a report on a suspected, that
How you doing?
gathering
Thanks for
of
stopping
Blue
by.
Sisters, when a wretched cry of
Fabian,
"Oh,
I
light!
think.
No!"
I'm not sure if I
came
pronounced
from the
that right
outer
or not.
room. Darting for the door, she made a stout wooden club appear in her hands, its head bristling with spikes. But when she dashed in, expecting to find Egwene defending herself, the woman was standing behind the keeper's table, staring at nothing. With a look of horror on her face, to be sure, but still unharmed and
Oh, not
unimportant
much, just
that Nynaeve could
chilling,
see.
smoking.
Egwene gave a
relaxing.
start at the sight of her, then gathered herself visibly. Nynaeve, Elida is on the seat.
I'm not sure what it is. I haven't
Nynaeve scoffed.
got to see the doctor about that part yet.
Swan Sanche.
But it's,
You're imagining
like I said, it's from my lower back all the way down to my legs.
I had a parchment
That
in my hand.
it hurts
Simon.
all the time. It's just that
Elida do Avrini Aroyhan.
some days are a lot worse than others.
Flame of Tarvalin, the Amerlin seat, and sealed with the Amerlin seal. Nynaeve's stomach tried to flutter up into her chest. But how?
Because the rest of my back
What has
hurts
happened to
too,
Swan?
but it's mainly like centered, like
The tower doesn't
lower
depose
back
Amerlin
all the way
except
down
for
to my
something
legs.
serious. Only 2 in nearly 3,000 years. Maybe Rand was serious enough. Egwene's voice was steady.
Some days,
and her eyes
some days
were still too
when it's
wide.
real bad, it just
Maybe
hurts
she
to
became
move.
ill with something the Yellows couldn't heal, or fell down the stairs and broke
Those
her neck.
days, yeah, those days
What
suck.
matters is that Elida is Amerlin. I don't think she will support Rand as Swan did. Moiraine, Nynaeve muttered, so sure that Swan would put the tower behind him. She could not imagine Swan Sanche dead. She had hated the woman often, been the slightest bit afraid of her on occasion. She could admit that now, to herself anyway. Yet
Well,
she
I haven't really had
she had thought that
a
Swan would
primary
last forever.
doctor.
Elida.
I've always just gone to
Jesus,
the,
Eileen is a
when it's been
snake
really
at this
bad, I've
troll
gone
as a
to the
cat. There's no telling what she might do.
ER. They gave
I'm
me a
afraid
shot
I
or
have a clue.
prescribed me pain pills
Egwene pressed both hands
and then
to
sent
her
me on my
stomach,
way.
as though to quell
It
the
wasn't
thunder of
until
the wind. It was a very short document.
I was in
I
the
managed to
hospital
read
for
it
when I
all.
had my
All loyal sisters are required
when
to
my
report the
appendix
presence
almost
of the
ruptured
woman
and I had that
Moiraine of Damodred.
emergency
She is to be detained if possible
appendix
by whatever
surgery
means are
that
necessary, and returned
actually
to the
met
White
and
Tower
talked
for
with
trial on charge of treason.
the
The
hospital
same sort of language
hospital
that was apparently used about Elaine.
director
If Elida wants Moiraine
for the hospital
rescued,
here.
it must mean she knows
I told
Moiraine has
she
been
asked me
missing
about
from
how come I
and she
haven't
does
had
not
one.
like
I told him about
Talking
like
was
explaining
good.
about my insurance,
Talking kept her from sicking up.
how a lot of them that
They
didn't
still
take my
believe
insurance
that.
or weren't taking
She had wanted to
patients.
bring Moiraine down.
So she actually
Now Elida
left.
was going to do it for
She
her.
found me a
She
doctor
certainly won't support Rand.
that took my
Exactly.
insurance and
Loyal sisters.
took me patients. So I
Egwene,
got set up
that
with her,
fits
and
with the Makura woman's message.
that's the first thing
Whatever
that
happened to Swan, the Ajahs have
we started
strength
working
over
on is the blood
Elida
pressure,
as
and
Amerlin.
haven't got to
It
the
must
pain
be.
part of it yet.
Yes, of course. Very good, Nynaeve.
Hey, Soy,
I
how
did
you
not
doing?
see that. Her smile was so pleased that Nynaeve smiled back.
So I gotta go.
There's a
Well, I gotta
report
go
on
drop off some
on
papers
the Amerlin's writing table about a gathering of blues.
to her
I was just reading it when you shouted,
next week
"I'll
or
wager the blues
this
will
week
support
sometime,
Elida."
probably
The
Wednesday or
blue-and-red
Thursday,
Ajahs had a sort of armed
because I gotta
truce
get
the rest of times, and came near
doctor's
going for each
approval and
other's throats
like
at
permission
first.
signed to have
But when they went back into the inner
dental
room,
work
the
done.
report was not to be found. There were plenty of documents.
So when I go back and see
showing
that,
what
her
we
for
had
that,
heard.
I'll
A brief reading made
do the
Egwene's
whole thing
eyebrows
about talking about
climb
blood
nearly to
pressure and
her
then
hair,
bring up about
but
my
not
back
the
and
one that
see
they wanted.
where it goes
Can
from
you
there.
remember what it said? Egwene asked. I had just gotten a few lines.
I
when
don't
you
like
shouted,
doctors and
and I just can't
dentists and like them types of
Try,
places to
Nynaeve.
begin with, so
Try very hard.
it's
I am
hard remembering
Egwene,
some of
do
that and
not
like
come. I am trying.
why I'm there, because if
What she was
I don't
doing,
like it,
Nynaeve, like a sudden
it fucks
hammer
with me for
between
some
the
reason.
eyes, excusing herself. To Egwene, a girl whose bottom she had switched for throwing a tantrum not more than 2 years ago. And a moment earlier she had been proud as a hen with a new egg because Egwene was pleased with her. She remembered quite clearly the day when the balance between them had shifted, when they ceased being the wisdom and the girl who fetched when the wisdom said fetch, becoming instead just 2 women far from home. It seemed that balance had shifted further, and she did not like it. She was going to have to do something to move it back where it belonged. The lie. She had deliberately lied to her for the first time ever. That was why her moral authority had vanished, and why she was floundering around, unable to assert herself properly. I drank the tea, Egwene. She forced each word deliberately.
Right?
She had to force them.
I have high blood
The
pressure. I'm
Makura
actually
woman's
on
fruit tea.
high blood pressure
She and
high
Lucy
blood
hauled
pressure
us
medicine.
upstairs like sacks of feathers.
Because mine
That
is
is
not
about
so
how
much
strength we had between
ringing in
us.
my ears
If
that I
Tom
get
and Julie hadn't come to pull us
real
out by the
bad
scruff of the necks,
lightheadedness and
we would
dizziness that
probably
I
be
get
there
moving
still.
around.
Or else on our way to the tower, so full of fork root we wouldn't wake up until we got here. Taking a deep breath, she tried for a time of righteous firmness, but it was
All right,
difficult
that's
when you
good.
had just confessed to
That
having
should
been
be a
an
fun
utter fool.
process, is trying to get
What
that
came
taken
out
care of.
sounded much more tentative than she liked. If you tell the wise ones about this, especially that Melaine,
And my back, I've had 2 surgeries on my
something
back.
like
I've
that
had,
should have sparked Egwene's ire.
I think, like
It
5,
seemed odd to want to
6
start a
spinal
row.
taps done.
Usually their quarrels were over Egwene refusing to see reason, and they seldom ended pleasantly, since the girl had formed the habit of continuing to refuse. But that was certainly better than this. Yet Egwene only smiled at
That's
her.
weird. I never got
An
ringing in my
amused
ears from my
smile.
blood pressure being
A
high. I just get,
condescending, amused smile.
like I said, lightheaded and
I
dizziness.
more
But
than
when
suspected as much,
I
Nynaeve.
deal with that a
You
lot
used to drone
to
on about
begin with,
herbs day and night, but you never
from
mentioned
blood
any plant
pressure
called
and
fork root. I was sure
other
you'd
reasons.
never heard of it until that woman mentioned it. You've always tried to put the best
Right?
face
They're
on
all
things.
treatable.
If you
As long
fell
as you stick
headfirst
with
into a
it.
pigsty, you'd try to convince everybody you did it on purpose.
I gotta,
Now, what we have to decide
in my case, I
are
gotta
no such
fight
thing,
myself to stick with it
Nynaeve spluttered.
because
You certainly do. Facts are facts. You might as well
I'm
stop
stubborn as
whining
hell,
about it and help me decide. Whining?
and I'm set in
This
my,
was not going
I'm
all the way she
stubborn,
wanted.
set in my ways, and
They are no such
sometimes
thing.
I just dig
Not
my heels
facts, I
in.
mean. I have never done what you said. For a moment, Egwene stared at her silently. You will not let go of this, will you? Very well.
Yeah, I've
You
had
lied to me. It was not a lie,
flashbangs,
she muttered
grenades go off like
softly. The other woman ignored her interruption.
maybe like 1.5 feet,
And you lied
2
to
feet
yourself.
from my head.
Do you remember what you made me drink the last time I lied to you? Suddenly,
And
a cup was in her hand.
I got
full of viscous,
severely
sickly
beaten up
green
real
liquid.
bad with a
It
baseball
looked as
bat.
if it had been scooped from a scummy, stagnant pond. The only time I ever lied to you. The memory of that taste was an effective discouragement. If you cannot tell the truth even to yourself.
Yeah, but I had
Nynaeve took a step
it
back
was a
before she could
flashbang
stop
like
herself. Boiled cat
a couple
and
feet from my
powdered
head.
Gavin's leaf. Her tongue writhed at just the thought. I did not really lie, actually. Why was she making excuses? I just didn't tell the whole truth. I am the wisdom. I was the wisdom. That ought to count for something still. You cannot really think, just tell her. You're not the child here, and you certainly are not going to drink. Egwene, Egwene was nearly under her nose. She could smell the acrid tang. All right, she said hastily. This can't be happening.
You're like a
But
rag
she
over.
could not
I don't
take her
know.
eyes off that brimming cup, and she could
My
not stop
brother
the
and mom
words
says that
tumbling
then
out.
he just wrapped me up in a bubble wrap.
Sometimes I try to make things look better for myself than they were. Sometimes. But never anything important. I've never lied about anything important. Never, I swear. Only small things. The cup vanished, and Nynaeve heaved a sigh of relief. Fool, fool woman.
Yeah,
She
because
couldn't have made you drink it.
I've
What is
definitely
wrong with you?
been through a lot of
What we
shit,
have to
and
decide,
I'm still
Egwene
alive and
said,
kicking.
as if nothing at all had
I
happened,
think let's
is who
see.
to tell.
I think I'm
Lorraine
at 5
certainly
now.
has to know, and
I've
Ran.
actually
But if everyone hears of it, the Aiel are
died 5
peculiar
times.
about Aes Sedai
I got
no
brought
less
back.
than anything else. I think they'll follow Rand as he who comes with the dawn in spite of anything. But once they learn the White Tower is against him, maybe they won't be so fervent. They'll learn sooner or later, Nynaeve muttered.
I've
She
definitely
could not have made me drink it.
lived an interesting
Later, better
life,
than sooner, Nynaeve.
to say the
So
least.
don't you go bursting out in a temper and telling the wise ones about this at our next meeting. In fact, it would be best if you didn't mention this visit to the tower at all. That way, maybe you can keep it secret. I am not a fool, Nynaeve said stiffly, and felt a slow burn when Egwene quirked that eyebrow at her again. She was not about to bring the visit up with the wise ones. Not because it was easier to find them behind their backs. Nothing like that. And she was not trying to put a good face on things. It was not fair that Egwene could leap about Tel'aran'rhiod however she wanted, while she had to put up with lectures and bullying. I know you are not, Egwene said, unless you let your temper get the better of you. You need to hold your temper and keep your wits about you if you're right about the Forsaken, especially Mogadine. Nynaeve glowered at her, opening her mouth.
I
to
try
say
not
that
to
she
press my
could,
luck.
too, keep
Just
her temper, and she would smack Egwene's ears if she thought differently.
shit happens
But the other woman gave her no chance.
because
We
I
must
blew my
find that
thumb off.
Howling Blue sisters, Nynaeve.
Here's a
If
see
they
if we can see
oppose
the
Alina,
scar.
maybe, just maybe, they will support Rand the way Swan did. Was a town mentioned, or a village,
Yeah, see,
a country even?
or even
I
a side.
think-
Let's see.
I cannot remember. She struggled to take the
It was
defensive
held on
note
by
out of her voice.
that much.
Light. I confessed everything. Made a fool of myself, and it's only made
That
things
was
worse.
4th of July.
I will keep trying.
I think it actually came up on
Good.
my brother's
We
news
must
feed
find
in his
them,
Facebook. I think it was like
For a
12,
moment, Egwene studied
13
her
years
while
ago
she
that
refused
that
to repeat
happened.
herself.
And that night,
Take care concerning
I actually
Mogadine.
died twice that
Do
night.
not go rushing off like a bear in spring just because she got away from you in Tanchico. I am not a fool, Egwene, Nynaeve said carefully. It was frustrating having to hold
That
her
was a
tongue,
hell of a 4th
but
of
if all
July.
Egwene would do was ignore it or scold her, there was nothing to be gained beyond looking
Because it
a
blew this
bigger
thumb
loser
off.
than she did already.
And
I know.
I can even
You
tell
said
just
that.
where it is. It broke
Just
all the
be sure
tendons
you
in this
remember
one.
it. Be careful.
Hey,
Egwene
Anthony,
did
how
not
you
fade
doing?
away this time. She vanished as suddenly as Brigitta. Nynaeve stared at the spot where she had been, running through her head all the things she should have said.
I hope everyone's
Finally,
doing
she
good today.
realized that she could stand there all
And
night.
staying safe
She
out
was
there.
repeating herself, and the time for saying anything was past. Grumbling under her breath, she stepped out of Tel Iran Riyadh, back to her bed in Sienda. Egwene's eyes popped open in near total darkness, broken only by a little moonlight streaming in through the smoke hole. She was glad to be under a pile of blankets. The fire was out, and freezing cold filled the tent. Her breath turned to mist in front of her face. Without raising her head, she scanned the interior. No wise ones. She was still alone. That was her biggest fear on these solitary excursions into Tel Iran Riyadh, returning to find Amis or one of the others waiting for her. Well, maybe not her biggest fear. The dangers in the world of dreams were every bit as great as she had told Nynaeve, but a big one nonetheless. It was not punishment that frightened her, not the sort that Bear doled out. Had she wakened to find a wise one staring at her, she would have
I hope
accepted
everyone had a
such
good
gladly.
and safe weekend.
But Amis had told her near the beginning that if she entered Tel Iran Riyadh without one of them accompanying her, they would send her away. They couldn't manage her any longer. That made her quail far more than anything else they could do. But even so, she had to push ahead. As rapidly as they taught, they were not rapid enough. She wanted to know now, to know everything. Channeling, she lit her lamp and put flames in the fire pit. Nothing remained for them to burn, but she tied the weave off. She lay there watching her breath mist in front of her mouth and waited for warmth enough to dress. It was late, but perhaps Moiraine would still be awake. What had happened with Nynaeve still amazed her. I think she'd actually have drunk if I had pressed her. She'd been so afraid that Nynaeve would learn that she certainly did not have the wild to jaunt about in the world of dreams alone. Feeling sure that the flush of embarrassment had given her away. All she could think of was keeping Nynaeve from speaking, keeping her from winkling out the truth. And she'd been so sure that Nynaeve would find out anyway. The woman was quite capable of turning her in and saying it was for her own good, that all she could do was talk, try to keep the focus on whatever Nynaeve was doing wrong. No matter how angry Nynaeve made her, she could not seem to bring up a shout. And with all of that, somehow, she had gained the upper hand. Come to think of it, Moiraine seldom raised her voice, and when she did, she was least effective in having what she wanted done. It had been so even before she began behaving so strangely with Rand. The wise ones never yelled at anyone either, except each other sometimes, and for all their grumping about the chiefs no longer listening, they still seemed to get their way much more often than not. There was an old saying that she had never really understood before. He strains to hear a whisper who refuses to hear a shout. She would not shout at Rand again. A quiet, firm, womanly voice, that was the thing. For the matter, she ought not to shout at Nynaeve either. She was a woman, not a girl throwing tantrums. She found herself giggling. She especially ought not to raise her voice with Nynaeve when speaking calmly produced such results. The tent finally seemed warm enough, and she scampered out, dressing quickly. She still had to break ice in her water pitcher before she could wash the sleep out of her mouth. Tossing the dark woolen cloak about her shoulders, she untied the strands of fire. Fire by itself was dangerous to leave tied, and as the flames vanished, ducked out of the tent. Cold closed on her like an icy vice as she hurried through the camp. Only the nearest tents were really visible to her, low, shadowed shapes that could have been part of the rugged earth, save that the camp extended for miles into the mountainous land to either side. These tall, jagged peaks were not the spine of the world. That was much higher, and lay days to the
What's
west.
everyone smoking on? Maybe smoking on
She
anything.
approached Rand's tent hesitantly. A sliver of light showed along the tent flap. A maiden seemed to rise out of the ground as she came closer, horn bow on her back, quiver at her waist, and spears and buckler in hand. Egwene could not make out any others in the darkness, but she knew they were there, even here surrounded by 6 clans, all claiming loyalty to the Karakarn. The Miagoma were somewhere to the north, paralleling their march. Timolan would not say what his intentions were. Where the other clans were, Rand did not seem to care. Is he awake, Inyla? She asked. Moon shadows shifted on the maiden's face as she nodded. He does not sleep enough. A man cannot go without rest. She sounded for all the world like a mother fretting over her son. A shadow beside the tent stirred, became Avienda with her shawl wrapped around her. She did not seem to feel the cool, only the hour. I would sing him a lullaby if I thought it might work. I have heard of women being kept awake all night by an infant, but a grown man should know that others would like to have their blankets. She and Inyla shared a quiet chuckle. Shaking her head over Aiel's strangeness, Egwene bent to peer through the crack. Several lamps lit the interior. He was not alone. Natael's dark eyes looked haggard, and he stifled a yawn. He at least wanted sleep. Rand lay sprawled close by one of the gilded oil lamps, reading a battered leather-bound book. One translation or another of the prophecies of the dragon, if she knew him at all. Abruptly he flipped back through the pages, read, then laughed.
Yeah, shit.
She tried to tell herself there was nothing of madness in that laugh, only bitterness. A fine joke, he told Natael, snapping the book shut and tossing it to him. Read page 287 and page 400, and tell me if you don't agree. Egwene's mouth tightened as she straightened. He really should be more careful with a book. She could not speak to him, not in front of the Gleeman. It was a shame that he had to use a man he barely knew for company. No, he had Avienda and the chiefs often enough, and Lan every day, and Mat sometimes. Why don't you join them, Avienda? If you were there, maybe he'd want to talk of something besides that book. He wanted to talk with the Gleeman, Egwene, and he seldom does that in front of me or anyone. Had I not left, he and Natael would have. Children are a great worry, I have heard, Inyla laughed. And sons the worst. You may find out the truth of this for me, now that you have given up the spear. Avienda gave her a moonlit frown and stalked back to her place against the side of the tent like an offended cat. Inyla seemed to think that funny, too. She clutched her sides, laughing. Muttering to herself about Aiel humor, she almost never understood it, Egwene made her way to Moiraine's tent, not far from Rand's. Here, too, there was a sliver of light, and she knew that the Aes Sedai was awake. Moiraine was channeling.
Hey, Southsider, how you doing?
But still enough for Egwene to sense. Lan lay sleeping nearby.
How's your day
wrapped in
going?
his
Hope you're
warder's
feeling
cloak.
better, bro.
Except for his head and boots, the rest of him seemed part of the night. Gathering her cloak, she held her skirts up and tiptoed so as not to wake him. His breathing did not change, but something made her look at him again. Moonlight glinted on his eyes, open and watching her. Even as she turned her head, they closed again. Not another muscle stirred. He might never have awakened at all. Sometimes the man unnerved her. Whatever Nynaeve saw in him, she could not see. Kneeling beside the tent flap, she peered in. Moiraine sat surrounded by the glow of Saidar, a small blue stone that usually hung on her forehead, dangling from her fingers in front of her face. It shone, adding a bit to the light of a single lamp. The fire pit held only ashes. Even the smell was gone. "May I come in?" She had to repeat herself before Moiraine answered. "Of course." The light of
Hell
Saidar
yeah,
faded
Southsider.
away,
That's good to
and
hear.
Aes Sedai began fastening the fine golden chain back into her hair. "You were eavesdropping on Rand?" Egwene settled herself beside the other woman. It was as cold in the tent as it was outside. She channeled flames atop the ashes in the fire pit and tied the flow. "You said you would not do it again." "I said that since the Wise Ones could watch his dreams, we should allow him some privacy. They have not asked again since he shut them out, and I have not offered. Remember that they have their own goals, which may not be those of the tower." As quickly as that, they had come to it. Egwene was still not sure how to tell what she knew without betraying herself to the Wise Ones, but perhaps the only method was to just tell it, and then feel her way. "Elida is Amerlin, Moiraine. I do not know what has happened to Swan." "How do you know?" Moiraine said quietly. "Did you learn something dream-walking? Or has your talent as a dreamer finally manifested itself?" That was her way out. Some of the Aes Sedai in the tower thought that she might be a dreamer, a woman whose dreams foretold the future. She did have dreams that she knew were significant, but learning to interpret them was another matter. The Wise Ones said the knowledge had to come from within, and none of the Aes Sedai had been any more help. Rand sitting down in a chair, and somehow she knew that the
Yeah,
chair's
pretty
owner
much. Just
would be
listening to my
murderously
audiobook,
angry at having the
smoking,
chair taken. That the owner was a woman
chilling
was
while
as
I'm
much as she could pick up
house
that,
sitting for my
and not
mom
a
and
thing
aunt
more.
again.
Sometimes the dreams were complex. Perrin lounging with Fail on his lap, kissing her while she played with the short-cut beard that he wore in the dream. Behind them, two banners waved, a red wolf's head and a
Doubt
crimson
I'd do
eagle.
a
A man
little
in a
live
bright yellow
while I was
coat
over
stood
here.
near to Perrin's shoulder, a sword strapped to his back. In some way she knew that he was a tinker, though no tinker would even touch a sword. And every bit of it except the beard seemed important. The banners,
Yeah, my
Fail
mom's got
kissing
a.
Perrin, even the tinker.
My mom and aunt, they got
Every
a
time he
central
moved
air.
closer to Perrin, it was as if a chill of doom shot through everything.
So hopefully it works today.
Watched
It didn't
throwing
work
dice
too good
with blood
yesterday.
streaming down his face.
I changed the
Right
filters,
Reynolds
so
pulled blows so she
that
could
should
not
help
see his
out.
wound, while Tom
Because it's supposed to
Merrilin
get
put his hand into a fire to draw out the
102
small blue
today.
stone that now dangled on Moiraine's forehead. For a dream of a storm, great dark clouds rolling
It's already
around wind or rain,
100 degrees
while forked
outside.
lightning bolts, everyone identical, rent the earth. She had the dreams, but as a dreamer she was a failure so far. "I saw an arrest warrant for you, Moiraine, signed by Elida as Amerlin, and it was no ordinary dream. All true. Just not
No
all of the
shit.
truth." She was suddenly glad that
I mean, I
was
have
not
trouble
there.
sleeping,
I'd
so
be the one staring at a cup if she
I
was.
usually end up going to bed about
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Perhaps it will
2,
not matter
3
so
in the
much if
morning.
Rand takes the Aiel across the dragon wall. I doubt that Elida has
That's
continued to
just
approach
95
rulers,
there.
even if she
Yeah, it's
knows that
100
Swan
here
is
right
doing
now. It's
so.
supposed to get up to
Is that all you can say? I think
102.
Swan was your friend once, Moiraine. Can't you shed a tear for her? The Aes Sedai looked at her, and that cool, serene gaze told her how far she had to go before she could use that title herself. Sitting, Egwene was nearly a head taller, and she was stronger in the power besides.
But it seems to
But
be
there was
keeping
no
it
degree
pretty
of
cool in here.
love and strength. I have no time for tears, Egwene. The dragon wall is not
It's a lot
only
cooler in
used as
here
a
than it is
wall,
outside,
and the
so
Alguenya.
that's the important thing.
Swan and I were friends once. In a few months, it will be 21 years since we began the search for the Dragon Reborn. Only the two of us, newly raised Aes Sedai.
Well, that's how I
Seer
am
and
too.
Vayu was raised
I
honorably
had trouble
from the
falling
left,
asleep.
a gray with more than a touch of red in her. Had she learned what we intended, we would have spent the rest of our lives doing penance with red sisters watching us even while we slept. There is a saying in Kyrian, though I have heard it as far away as Tarabon and Saldeia. Take what you want, and pay for it. Swan and I took the path we wanted, and we knew we would have to pay for it eventually. I do not see how you can be so calm. Swan could be dead, or even stilled. Elida will either oppose Rand altogether or try to hold him somewhere until Tarman guide him. You know she'll never let a man who can channel run free. At least not everyone is behind Elida. Some of the Blue Aja are gathering somewhere. I don't know where yet. And I think others have left the tower too. Nynaeve said that she was given a message about all sisters being welcome to return to the tower by an eyes and ears of the yellow. If blues and yellows have both gone, others must have. And if they oppose Elida, they may support Rand. Moiraine sighed, a soft sound. Do you expect me to be happy that the White Tower has split apart? I am Aes Sedai, Egwene. I gave my life to the Tower long before I ever suspected the dragon would be reborn in my lifetime. The Tower has been a bulwark against the Shadow for 3,000 years. It has guided rulers to wise decisions, stopped wars before they began, halted wars that did begin. That humankind even remembers that the Dark One waits to escape, that the last battle will come, is because of the Tower. The Tower, whole and united. I could almost wish that every sister had sworn to Elida, whatever happened to Swan. And Rand? Egwene kept her voice just as steady, just as smooth. The flames were beginning to put a little warmth into the air, but Moiraine had just added her own chill. The dragon reborn. You yourself said that he cannot be ready for Tarman Gaiden unless he is allowed his freedom, both to learn and to affect the world. The Tower United could take him prisoner to spite all the Aiel in the Waste. Moiraine smiled a small smile. You learn. Cool reason is always better than hot words. But you forget that only 13 sisters linked can shield any man from Saidin. And even if they do not know the trick of tying flows, fewer can hold that shield. I know you are not giving up.
Alright, everyone. I'm probably going
What
to call
you
it
need
into
to
this
do-
life for right now.
I mean to deal with
I'll
the
probably
losses
be
I've
on
been
again
for as long as I can.
later on
At
this
least
evening or
Rand
tonight.
will be easier to be around. Now that
Either
I
a
no
gaming
longer
one or
tried to
another
turn
one
him
like
from what he
this.
wants. I suppose I should be happy that he
Until
does
next
not
time,
think that
everyone.
Vetch is wine.
Oh yeah, I want to thank
He
everyone for
does
stopping
this
by and
time, even
all
if he
the
seldom
new ones
gives
that
any
stopped
sign of
by.
what he thinks of
Appreciate
what I
everyone's
do.
love and support.
I will leave you
Till
to
next
tell
time,
me
everyone.
about
Hope we'll
Swan
come
and the
out.
Tower. That would avoid awkward questions.